Okay, to dismantle the restore, not the gear side, but the body and housing, what I'd first like to do is I like to take my DeWalt drill and I just use a little impact with an extension with a Phillips bit, and you can buzz these out pretty quick. Okay, so those 3 screws, now you'll be able to take the cap off. Underneath there, you'll see brushes, the steel brushes. So I'll take a little screwdriver here and I'll pop that brush out. Make sure you're going to have the little jaws or teeth on it, and those will be faced up. Okay, so that's the brush. So you'll pop both of those out. Okay, they're spring loaded, so be careful with them because they'll break easy. Okay, so that'll be it. So the reason I take those out, so when you split this body apart, we'll go ahead and split the body apart real quick. There's 12 screws here. Okay, on this one side. Now there's 11 that are visible, and the 12th one is actually behind the rubber bumper. So you're going to have to pull out the rubber bumper. Just goes a lot easier if you have an impact like this. Now, to get the rubber bumper out that's right here, you're going to put your finger underneath it, slide it straight up. Now for this, I typically have to use just a Phillips screwdriver because my bit won't get down inside that. So you just loosen that up. So the reason I'm pulling those brushes out, because when you go to put the motor back in, sometimes if it pulls out the wrong side, the brushes will spring load in. Okay, and so, but now it should be ready to be pulled apart. So what I like to do is I grab it from the front, just kind of split it there a little bit, and I grab it from the back, put my thumbs basically in the rear exhaust and pull it apart, and just keep working it back and forth, and there it splits apart, right? You could always take that roller out first. So this time, so here's what happens. So see how the motor's stuck in the gear side? The brushes would be in this side. Now if I would have left those brushes in here, they would have pressed in and spring loaded to the inside of this motor in here. Okay, and so way back in here where my finger is, if you could see it, they would have pushed in there. Then you would have gone to put the motor back in and it wouldn't have seated properly. Okay, so this will give you the opportunity to blow it out. So what I do is I take a leaf blower and I put it over here and I turn it on, blow it all out that way, blow it out, and then I put a leaf blower on this side, blow it out. Also clean it out, maybe pull the switch back, blow it out. And if you see any dirt or debris, I like to take a little chip brush and I clean over the motor, because you'll get dust inside here. You'll get dust on this circuit board. This is a little speed dial. This is the only part that's soldered in, but you'll be able to, you can, if you want to pull that out and get it loose, you do is take like a little set of channel locks and you grab on the very edge of that and you pry it up. Okay, so now that little circuit board is out of the slot. Okay, so then you could dust it off and stuff like that. But so if you go to pull it out, you got to make sure it's pushed back in that slot. Okay, and then you get your switch, make sure it goes back in. So most of the dust will be in here, but there'll be a lot inside the motor and the body. So once you blow it out real good, then you're going to want to blow out this side real good. You can also, if you want, you could pull the motor out of this side, just wiggle a little bit and the motor pops out. See, there's a bearing on that end that fits down into that housing. Okay, so then this one's a little dirty, so you'll want to use that brush again, that chip brush, clean it all out, right, blow it out. Then you could be able to push that motor right back in place. Now if it doesn't go, just you turn it just a little bit until it seats down good. Okay, because it's going to be engaging with those gears, but you can see the revolution of the motor and how this shaft is spinning here. You see that? It's just really, it's geared. You can hear it. Now, what I like to do while I'm doing this, I like to take the 5 screws off of here. We'll go through that real quick. These are a little bit shorter, so you're going to want to have like a little tray so you don't lose these screws, okay? So I'll pull these out real quick here, and we'll take a look. Okay, now that I got those 5 screws out, what you could do, you can always just tap this shaft and it pops that off. Okay, so they'll give you a chance to clean inside there. Now, this one there's grease underneath the gears, but there needs to be grease on the gears, right? So this shaft will actually pop out of the end cap. So what I like to do is I take this gear, I pop it out, I just make sure I put it back in the tool where it belongs, right? So now it's seated in the tool. And so what I'll do is I'll get some white lithium grease. I'll grab some real quick. Get some white lithium grease, and I squeeze it out, and I just make sure I put a good squirt on there as I rotate this part when it spins. You could just put a gob in there, right? I don't have the other gear in there, but make sure it's on the gear. Okay, see? So now it's engaging on the gears. Okay? So when I put this other gear and the shaft back in, all right, now they're gonna mesh up and it's gonna get grease in there. Don't worry if it gets a little bit on the edge, it's not a big deal. When you put the cap on, it'll cover it up. So we'll go ahead and put the cap back on. Okay, this is what keeps your restore quiet as well. Okay, so now that we got that on, I'll just clean that off a little bit. And so now we got the gear back in, we got the motor, you can see it spinning freely. Now when you pull this motor, one thing to notice, when you pull the motor, let's pull it back out again. A lot of times there's going to be dust on these fan blades. See here, you can see some pile up. So what I like to do is I like to take a little toothbrush, take this little toothbrush, clean it, or just like one of those spiral brushes, run it in there. Make sure not to get it down inside the motor, and blow this whole thing out real good. If you want, you could spray this down with contact cleaner and get it real clean. And so you just don't want to mess anything up, okay? But so we can put that motor back in. Now, it might take a minute to seat properly. You just got to make sure it's wiggled in there right, so the gears and everything mesh. So you see that? Okay, so that's basically how to take it apart. Now, this is the exhaust tube here that goes back in the restorer. So let's get those 5 screws back in. It only takes a second here. Let's just do that while we got these, so we don't lose anything, okay? This should do it. Now, if you want to do this like once a year, depending on your use, you could do it like every 6 months. If you use it heavy, like all the time, I would recommend making sure you're attached to a shop vac. Okay, you're gonna hear, I'm in my basement, so you're gonna hear the furnace going. Okay, so now that you got both sides cleaned out real good, let's say, you can put it back together. So it should just slide back together how it came apart, okay? By the way, if you have to replace the cord for any reason, there's one terminal block that the wire connects to here, and then it connects to the switch just with the Phillips screw. And then you have to take this little clamp off, but you can replace the cord, or if it gets bad, you could cut it back and strip it back and rerun it in and attach it to this terminal and attach it to the switch here, okay? So that's it. And so let's put this back together here. Now you have to wiggle it just a little bit to make sure it seats properly. So now it goes back together no problem because those brushes aren't in the way. So I got some white lithium on there. Anyway, I'll just wipe that off. But so let's run our screws back into the body and put it back together here. these will be pretty quick. So now I would usually like to start on one end and just go in the reverse order. That way you're trying to work the screws all the way around in the perimeter. Okay, so you hear the dog upstairs, but it's loud. It's seemingly loud because there's a wood floor. It goes pretty quick, especially when you have a impact. Just when they seat all the way, you're pretty much done. Make sure not to strip anything out. And I always like to, if I fix a tool, I always clean it up real good. You can use anything for like degreaser and stuff like that. Just want to make sure your gears are greased and there's no dirt in there. In the gear drive system, there should never be dirt, okay? If there is, something's wrong. But it will get sucked in the motor in the housing if you don't use a shop vac. Oh, I'm sorry. One thing I forgot to show you here. Let's keep a couple of these screws out, by the way. This one, remember, in the front is going to go back in here. And you're going to have to use that Phillips, I guess, again, unless you got a different bit. Okay. So let's tighten it back in there. And I'm going to put the bumper back in. Okay, so let's pull a couple of these screws out. I should have showed you this ahead of time, but since we have this little exhaust piece here, now you'll notice there's a tab there in the front, which is going to line up with this little tab slot inside the restorer. So you just have to make sure that you can split this apart a little bit. Okay, and you don't have to have the whole body apart, just enough to slide it in there, and it should seat. You'll hear it snap into place. Okay, hear that? Okay, now you know it's seated all the way. We'll go ahead and put the rest of the screws back in. This should only, I mean, you could take it down and rebuild them. I think I've done it in under 10 minutes. Something like that. When you get into pulling a motor, it might take a little bit longer because you're going to have to desolder some stuff. Okay, so now we have this bumper still left. We're going to slide that back in, okay, with the bevel on the outside. So that'll slide back in, cover our holes again. And so now we have our brushes, okay, our metal brushes, remember? And we're going to put them back in just while they come back up. And you got to make sure that they seat down into this little clip here, and there's little holes or slots for the clip to snap into. So we'll go ahead and put them in. Now these are a wearable item, so if you notice yours are really wore down, that's perfectly normal. You just might need to get some replacement brushes. Okay, so make sure you put it in the right way. Just make a note on how you took it out, and that way you can put it back in the same way. Okay? So now we've got that back into place. We put our motor restore cap back on. Okay? Back in. Get all my 3 screws kind of in place. You know, just take it. Okay, so that pretty much does it. That's a total dismantle, clean, put my roller back in, and you should be good to go. Test it. You want to run it for that grease. I always like to run it on low a little bit. So I'm going to turn down the speed. Okay, make sure it's cleaned up. Okay, so it should make it quieter when you change out that grease. All right. All right, that's basically a dismantle and clean and re-grease the gears for the Restore. And I always like to clean everything up, like I said, with a little chip brush. You buy them, they're a little longer sometimes. What I'd like to do is I cut them short on an angle so you can really get in there. If you have to, use a toothbrush. And I like to use this white lithium grease, and it works really well for the gears, keeps them quiet. And so that'll help save your Restore. Remember, dust port attached to that, it'll keep the tool a lot cleaner, and the accessories will last a lot longer also. So hopefully this helps you out. So if you need to maintain your Restore, now you know how.